Footy's crazy, isn't it, sometimes? 1 minute you're clinging on in a dire game and the next minute you're watching Jesse Hogan turn into Gary Ablett Sr. at times. Round 9 it had it all. It had comebacks, it had screw-ups, it had clutch moments, and it probably has coaches losing their hair by quarter time. Today we're going to do our review a little bit different. We've broken it down to a talking point for each club from this round, one thing to watch for next week, and one thing we're looking at for them to fix to get the chocolates. So let's get straight into it, run that intro, and let's look at the 18 talking points for the clubs. Crows come off the back of an 89-84 point win versus Port, and they copped a barrage from Port. And to be fair, they didn't fold. Riley Thilthorpe is turning into a monster in the air, and James Peatling is playing like a bloke possessed at the minute. And Nix has definitely started to build a side that has finals DNA. The one thing to watch versus Collingwood this week for me is Riley Thilthorpe at the G versus that Pies backline. Can he break away from Frampton and Moore, who seem to have found something to stop these big toes? One thing that I would like to see the Crows improve at the minute is they're breaking even at stoppage this year from scores, and at times I feel like this is probably their undoing. They do have multiple controls to do this, but I feel like the source is incredibly important, and one that I am watching against a side like Collingwood, who have a really good setup around there. Brisbane Lions, they drew 71-all with North Melbourne, and they looked half asleep in Hobart, it has to be said. Zorko carried them like it was 2015, and even though they nearly got rolled, I feel like this wake-up call is something that they needed. This week, they've got Melbourne, and going to playing Brisbane is always a tough test. You know, Melbourne, when they're going to be in and around the ball, they're going to make it incredibly hard and they're going to make it incredibly stagnant. And that leads me on to that kind of what do Brisbane have to do versus Melbourne at the Gabba? Well, for me, it's a big test for McCluggage and Dunkley. The midfield intensity, when it's not there, definitely they look susceptible to being overrun in that situation despite their talent. And at times the effort and the content, and also when you look at the stoppage scores, North got the ascendancy on there. They've got to do something with the on-ball bulls. You know Gorn, you know Petrarca, you know Viney. They're going to be really tough around the clutches. So for Brisbane, definitely this week, I'm looking for them to gain some control. Carlton, they got a win, gutsy, it has to be said, 77-62 versus the Saints. Down to minimum rotations, Saints coming in, needing to win, and Carlton did stood up. Harry looked like an old school full forward, and the defensive six now look like they're on the same page. Obviously this week, at Sydney, at the SCG, smaller deck, tighter footy, this is going to be interesting because Sydney's makeshift defence is vulnerable. For me, the big thing I'm looking for the Blues to improve is that forward half pressure. This is something that I feel is so poignant with the Blues. And although it wasn't so much needed last week, it is imperative against a side that does score well from the back half of the ground. The Blues at times are incredibly wasteful inside 50, so the best way to negate that is creating a lock-in territory inside 50 and finding a way to score. The Pies, they handsomely beat Fremantle 97-83, and this is one of them games where you look at the stat sheet and at times you think, well, Fremantle were a chance, but that is Collingwood in a nutshell. Elliott turns the game in a blink of an eye. Crisp, after his miss at the siren the week before, was pure class, and Bobby Hill just has them moments to bring the game in. How do you handle a tall, aggressive forward line? And this is the one to watch this week against Adelaide, Moore and Frampton. They'll be tested, but their synergy in recent weeks has been absolutely outstanding. They'll have a plan for Adelaide, and it'll be interesting. And again, this is what we said about Adelaide. It's all around about being good in the source. If they don't lift around stoppage, that is where Adelaide will be quite comfortable driving that ball in as quickly as possible to them three-headed snake at the top. The source is always important, and this one's going to be a really interesting battle. Essendon, they beat Sydney 71-63. Started like it was going to be a 100-point win. Finished like they were trying to survive. Caddy, though, was very, very integral in his link-up play, but also his ability to take some putrid inside 50 marks. This week, doggies, Marvel, dry deck, chance for the Bombers to really, really show that they mean something against one of the best midfields and a midfield that has been solid. For me, with Essendon, it's about staying switched on for longer. Their best to their worst is a huge gap. And in a league where teams can score 4 or 5 goals in a matter of minutes, that is really imperative in this. If they can switch on, they can keep it tight and ask some questions, which I feel like no one's asked big enough questions of the Dogs thus far. Fremantle, they lost to the Pies, and the talking point really from this one is it looks so right. Doing all right at clearance, contested balls, far inside 50s, Shy Bolton playing Shy Bolton things, but it's that synergy, it's that ability. They feel like they don't know when to go and when to stop. And against GWS this week, the toughest test really, because GWS, if you're napping, they beat you up. If they can't really get that synergy between midfield and forward and actually put pressure and make GWS, they're in trouble. And the thing to improve there is that forward half synergy. It's all well and good having that midfield. It's all well and good having Josh Tracy and Shy Bolton as your link-up player. If you're not actually generating anything, it's completely pointless. So that is something we're looking at this week. Geelong, narrow loss by 4 points to GWS, and they really did fumble the bag in this one. They missed some sitters. Dangerfield wasn't Dangerfield that we've seen the last 2 weeks. And at times it feels like Jeremy Cameron, particularly versus GWS, was just floating wherever he wanted and not in the hot zone. They let GWS, in my opinion, off the hook. Cats, they rarely lose 2 straight. They've got Port this week. If they turn up angry, I suspect this could be brutal. For me, though, the big thing to improve is that ruck structure. At times, I don't quite understand it. I know that they've got injuries, but I don't think how they're negating the ruck at the moment is the right answer. It seems too flimsy. I do like Blitzarbs more in the ruck and leaving Sam de Koning back. I know, obviously, there's a height differential between them, but for me, if you can win it in the source with Geelong like Carlton did, you do have a very good chance of beating them. And that's something that I feel like has always been a Geelong talking point. Gold Coast, they managed to hold on and beat the Dogs 106-96. In the Darwin heat, it's their home. They're so good. King was good. Rowell was a beast. And Graham, for me, is becoming Dimmer's pet talisman. 7 in a row up north. It's a massive test versus Hawthorn. Hawthorn are that team that have a game plan for the situation. This is a massive danger game if they're not switched on. For me, when I watch Gold Coast, it's definitely about not just relying on your back half scores. That they are a very slingshotty side. And if the pressure's not there, that's only one thing. They like to play it in the back half. And as I said in the previews at the start of the season, this could get them in trouble. This is going to be a really, really entertaining one because I feel like Gold Coast could be blowing sides away. And in the minute, they're not maximising on that. GWS, they got that 4-point win that we talked about GWS. And the talking point was the efficiency late. Green was a bull. Hogan was surgical in the defence. Even though it was outgunned in territory, it really did hold up well. And that is my big question mark about GWS. Can they do it under duress? And this week they did. But for me, can they, against Fremantle, can they handle repeat inside 50 entries? They know Fremantle aren't going to do that, and that is their susceptibility. But if Fremantle do it, can they do it? Can GWS hold on? For me, with them, they really need to find a way of playing an extra behind the ball to negate that slingshot at the back. When you've seen teams against GWS, their defence sometimes gets overrun. It's a bit like what Adelaide have done in the last 3 weeks, where they have kind of just added that little James Peatling floating role. Against Fremantle, their midfield is going to match up. They really need the ascendancy here. Hawthorn, they beat Melbourne quite comfortably, and this was one of them testy games early, but once they started getting it, even Sicily started hitting targets, Gunston won down the clock. They were very, very impressive, and they won it in a canter when for 3 quarters it looked like they were in trouble. Against Gold Coast in Darwin, they need to handle the heat, they need to handle it fast, and they need to make sure that they rely on their big ball users to really get the game going. This game is a big test for Hawks. And one thing to improve for me, it's their pressure in and around the ball. They want to live up north, it's all about putting pressure and really maximising that slippery ball under duress. And at times I find like Hawthorn are either manic pressure or too standoffish. This will be an interesting one to watch for me. Melbourne, they lost, as we said, to Hawthorn. Threatened to win. But again, Gone was good. Harvey Langford was ridiculous. But the fade out keeps happening. And it's two big midfields going up against each other in Brisbane. One big stage. Can they gain some control? And the big thing to improve for me is using the ball. They get a lot of contested possessions. They do very well in the clutches. They just don't use it. And this is it. They need to go to that plan B. Get the ball moving forward. So I'm really intrigued to see a team that is probably vulnerable at the minute. Good time to play Brisbane. Can they do it? North Melbourne, they drew with Brisbane and they did play very well and they outplayed Brisbane for large parts of the game. Comden turning into a real top backman and Luke Parker showing why they got him in, but still couldn't close a game out. One to watch here, this is against against Richmond, and this really needs to be a win. And this is going to be entertaining. They've got Wardlaw back. He is integral. That midfield has so many names. They need to gain the ascendancy and they need to beat Richmond. If they lose this one, this could be a big, big problem. And the one thing to improve for North is they do so well intercepting and turning the ball over of the opposition. Use it quickly. They win it back and they allow the opposition to reset. And I don't know if that's a confidence issue or I don't know if that's just an actual tactical issue. But at times they win the ball so well and they don't use it. This is going to be a really intriguing battle because Richmond got a great blueprint at the minute. Port Adelaide, they lost the showdown. The final term really showed everything that they're about. 2 goals, 6. Rosie was dominated in that. Finlayson and the big Greek Mitch, he did really well. But one to watch this week versus Geelong is, can they play on emotion? We know that they seem to need a reason to win. They're back home again. This is huge for me. And my big thing to improve here is their defensive acts at times are woeful. Defensively, they look really vulnerable. They look all right from tee to green. It's almost like they can't tee off at the minute, but their iron play is good, to use a golf analogy. They need to be more consistent. At times, it feels like they're executing 3 different game plans from the back half of the ground. Rosie really needs to be the control down there. Now he's gone back there, and it's going to be really entertaining because Geelong are a very well-structured system. Richmond, they beat the Eagles in the basement-dwelling derby. Tom Brown, he was like Usain Bolt with that rundown tackle against Tom Gross. And the Tigers were hot, they wobbled, but they fought back. And that is a real impressive thing. The one to watch here for me is, can they do it against North again? If they get this win here, they're probably +4 on where most people had them. People had them winning 0 games this year. I had them winning 4 or 5, and I feel like they can do it. And last week, what was impressive again was how some of the older heads stood up. This game here, what's one thing to improve? For me, I want to see more front half pressure. At times, I feel like they do get caught in the trap, particularly the mid portions of the game, flooding the back half of the ground and not backing what their system is. I really do like Richmond's system. They're playing the right way as if they are the team already finished the rebuild, and that's going to hold them in good stead. And against North, I feel like North are vulnerable. Take the game on. Don't fear them. St Kilda, they lost to the Blues 77-62, and this was frustrating because it was one of them games where both sides were in it, and at times they had their ascendancy, but they couldn't land the killer blow. And when you've got Wanganeen Milwera and you've got Marshall breaking even, the execution was poor. The skills from them were horrible, and their decision to play it safe for nearly 95% of the game cost them this game. Against West Coast, they can't possibly lose. They really can't. But this is more about winning the game comfortably and really getting some kind of ascendancy in the game. They can do what they do against Fremantle, but then when they play the Blues, you do ask the question, where's that intensity? You've got to do it. And for me, what I want to see is, we know that they can be gritty. We know that they can do the dirty stuff. Use that outside run. I'm really looking to see in this game some expansive game plan. Once the game is on your terms and you've tired them out, stretch them. So I'm really intrigued about this game. Sydney, a loss to Essendon. And this was one of them things, wasn't it? They were missing in action in the first half. They came back, and this has kind of been Sydney throughout the year already, that they don't show up, then they have a burst, the scoreboard's not so bad, bang. The way they butcher the ball inside 50 is shocking. The only big takeout for that was Grundy did look okay against a massive ruckman. He wasn't outshone. But again, it's like too many stopgaps in different places. They have played Francis forward, Francis back. It doesn't look right at the minute, and this is against Carlton, and you know Carlton are going to bring it. But for me, with the Swans, it's about 4 quarters. If they do a one bad quarter and Carlton have the best, this game will be over Red Rover. They're leaking heat, and that is something that they've got to improve. At this stage, with Sydney, they really don't have a control method at the minute. It's either all or nothing, and that's something that they've got to improve, that ability to be controlled without the ball for 4 quarters, because at times they all seem to be going ball hunting and it becomes easy to stretch them out the back. West Coast, a tight loss, 2 points to the Tigers, and they gave themselves a sniff. They did well around the midfield. You had the players really working together, and it was heartbreaking. They had some late outs with their captain, but St Kilda, a very controlled side, and they've got to go into this game here, and they have to grab a win somewhere. Back home, this is where they really want to put some pressure on a team that was incredibly disappointing. And many things to improve, but one thing I want to see with them is their ability from the back half of the ground. They have got some good users in that back half of the ground, and at times they move the ball so slowly, they invite pressure, and against the St Kilda side, that could be a disaster. I want to see them take the game on. At times it feels like they are playing to keep the margin narrow, where teams like Richmond, even North Melbourne to an extent, are playing a system that they want to play in 3 or 4 years, and I haven't quite seen that from the Eagles. And we finish with the Doggies. They lost by 10 to Gold Coast. Bevo, he gets the best out of them, and they could have snatched this late. It's really tough. Libba was immense in this game. O'Donnell had his moments as well, and they've got a real strong list. They're making it work without their tall key pillar in Sam Darcy. And against Essendon, this could be chaos ball. Essendon love a scrap, so do the Doggies, and they want to get the 4 points here against a team that is really confident in Essendon. One thing I'm looking for from the Doggies is they dominate around stoppage. They dominate around forward half. But it's really maximising the turnover. With the midfield at the disposal and their halfbacks and the players they've got, they really should be killing teams on that slingshot transition. They need to polish that up. And against Essendon, a side that is quite susceptible at times to a turnover, again, score from turnover, they've got to maximise this. If they can get that turnover game going, we could be talking about a bona fide top 4 side here. So that's your full wrap then. Let me know if you enjoyed it. We've changed it up, talking point, one to watch, and something to look from in this game. Let me know below, which team do you think is on the rise? Who's going to have a sensational round 10? Smash that like button, hit that subscribe. Stay tuned, so much coming up. Watch-alongs. We've got some AFL 26 content, previews, VFL watch-alongs, the full bang mid-season draft content. And if your team's struggling, just remember, there's always next week. See you soon. Pommy out.